This is enough now.
Bloody trip! The Equinox Killer. This is a 2024 Italian movie directed and co-written by Aaran. And I watched this on Tubi, and I should point out I watched a dubbed version. I would normally watch a foreign language movie in its original language, but there wasn't an option for that, so I had to watch this dubbed version. So that is the one I'll be reviewing, so bear that in mind. What is the story? Well, this is actually made as a part one of a series, but effectively we focus on a group of young adults, group of friends going for a kind of trip in some sort of villa out in the country, and there is a legend of this serial killer who made a pact with the devil, and of course we know that this is going to be a real thing when this killer comes a knocking. And what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about what works in this movie's favour. I will say there's a couple of ideas this movie has which I think were neat. So there's a twist early on, which is kind of to do with the prank. I thought was quite good, fairly good kind of twist early on as well, so you're not really expecting it. There's a couple of just neat ideas that the movie tries to implement, like they're under siege at one point in this kind of villa, and they try to, because they're unarmed and all this sort of thing, they try to defend themselves as best they can. So they like break glass up and put it like on the wind, like just under the window. So if someone comes through, they'll sort of stand on the glass and stuff. Again, I'm thinking, okay, fairly sort of like sensible kind of ideas here. Not too bad. The killer, I think, looks cool. He's sort of menacing, but also has a somewhat practical sort of, outfit. I sometimes think, I'm not a huge slasher fan, to be honest, and I often think that is just like impractical. All you've got to do is turn someone's mask, and they're not going to be able to see. But this was a relatively, practical suit. And the killer has an interesting sort of backstory where, this is not just a guy who's messed up. He's being kind of doing it for reasons that are somewhat beyond his control. It attempts to give the killer a little bit of depth and sympathy. So, and I would say there's a couple of reasonable shots. There's a couple of like reasonable elements of cinematography. So that's kind of what I would say on the positive side. Now, with the critiques. So let's be clear, I'm looking at the dubbed version of this, because what I'm going to say, I think, or at least one of the critiques here is going to be maybe different if you're looking at the original kind of like Italian language version. That is, the acting here is terrible, but we are talking the voiceovers. Yeah, but it's just one of the worst dubbings I've seen, to be honest. This was on Tubi, I watched this, so there's not an option to watch it in its original language. Although I will suspect, I don't know, because of just the facial acting and the sort of the body language of some of these actors, even though the actual dialogue delivery may have been better potentially in the Italian language version, I don't think this physical acting was particularly up to snuff either, if I'm honest. So I would wager the acting just generally maybe isn't the best. Although, as I say, I can only definitively say, in my opinion at least, the dubbed version's acting was not good. Also, but maybe less so relevant, I have to say I think the dialogue here is horrible. Now, obviously I'm listening to the English translation, and this may well have been true of it had subs. But even if it was just a rough translation, I think sometimes the dialogue here is really trite, really sort of cliche and unnatural dialogue that would be said in situations like this. I'll give you an example. So we have someone who is killed, and it's by accident, and no one really ever just thinks about or even discusses, saying, well, let's talk to the police because it was kind of an accident. I mean, and we can prove this, really you wouldn't be in that much trouble, I don't think, with the situation that happens. But it never comes up. They immediately go to try and like cover the body, you know, cover it up and stuff. And I was thinking, I honestly don't think you would. I mean, you could argue that, but you could argue they're panicked, but they don't seem particularly panicked. Yeah, but it's just that they immediately go to try burying him in the desert or something like this, you know. I'm thinking, I actually think you would probably get away with a self-defense situation because it really wasn't anyone's fault. Yeah, so the dialogue here, I don't know, it just seems a little bit silly to me and just not kind of realistic. And even they didn't decide to do that in that instance, surely that it would be at least discussed. Anyway, so the dialogue isn't particularly good. The story is super generic. It is a super generic slasher. As I said, they've tried to give this killer a little bit of a backstory, but it's just done in sort of exposition, really. You don't really see, you know, all it is a masked killer at the end of the day. And it's like, okay, so we're told a bunch of stuff about him, but we don't see anything like that. It's just so great. So what it comes down to is a guy silently walking around in a mask. We haven't seen that before, but even then, I don't think the kills are particularly kind of graphic or impactful and things like that. There's very little in the way of sort of practical gore and things. It's just like somewhat of a muted experience, I would suggest. And then it's just, I think it tries to build out this kind of mythology around it. And I just think it's a little silly and a little, just kind of like dumb sounding, to be honest. And it tells you all this kind of supernatural stuff that's surrounding it, but we never really see anything to kind of like to sort of to support it, really. And like, it's not just these people that are involved. There is things, I mean, other people, and it's like, well, if you think this, surely you must have seen things to believe it. But we never see it as an audience. The characters, our protagonists, are, as well as not being particularly well acted, in my opinion, I think are fairly unlikable, if we're being a little bit picky with that one. Yeah, fairly unlikable kind of protagonists. Just doing the same old thing. Girls running away from a kind of a masked killer grabbing them. You know, it's just so generic. And again, you might think, oh, I'm not particularly a slasher fan, to be honest. So you may think, oh, Leo, you're not particularly a slasher fan. So you know, of course you don't really like it. But even slasher fans, I would suggest to you, there's such a buffet of different movies you could watch. This one just seems like nothing really special. And even the things that most slasher fans would enjoy, I feel it really doesn't deliver on much of that. Although I wouldn't say it was like a completely horrible film, it's certainly at best lackluster and at worst kind of just stupid. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. I have to be honest with you, I thought about telling this one off whilst watching it, but I thought I can't review it unless I'd watched it all. It was, you know, over an hour past. I thought, man, so soldier on. So I did, for you guys. Anyway, 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.